Good morning, people of Grace. We have been shut down by inclement weather for the third straight Sunday, which, in the midst of a pandemic, when we're already so locked down and there's so much sadness and loss going on, I know is very discouraging. It's discouraging for me, and I know it's discouraging for a lot of you as well. Um, but God's promises remain true. And we've been working our way through 1 John chapter 3. And today we're going to be looking at chapter 3, verse 18 through chapter 4, verse 3. Just briefly touching on some things, which I will then build on next week. And hopefully we'll have an in-person service next Sunday. We'll see. But in 1 John chapter 3, verse 18 and the following verses, I think there's three big points that we want to focus on. We're going to want to make a distinction. We want to distinguish rightly. Once we distinguish rightly, then we can ask the right questions, which will be our second point. And when we are asking the right possessions, we are able to discern or authenticate or test whether things are going in a good direction or a bad direction in our souls. So I want to touch on those three things today because those three components amount to authenticity, being an authentic follower of Jesus Christ, and really tasting and seeing that the Lord is good, that his love is authentic, and that it's real, and it is a source of hope. Even if you're like John and those who he was writing to, whose country has been ravaged and destroyed by war, who have been rejected by their own countrymen and their own ethnic group, and they have migrated away from their homeland into the new territory of Asia Minor and the churches around Ephesus, from which John is writing. That's a lot of loss. Yet, John's letter is written that our joy might be complete. And we don't want to stray too far from that introductory statement that John made in chapter 1. So that we understand why he's writing and that we can have joy. And the joy of the Lord is a source of strength, and it's internal and it's rooted in a relationship with Jesus Christ. And it can't be taken from us, though there are threats to it, and we can lose that joy. I don't want us to lose that joy. I don't want to lose that joy. That's without that joy, there's no motivation. And that's a sad place for any follower of Jesus Christ to be. And we're all fighting to keep our morale up. Morale is a big part of life in general, but also of walking with God. So for us to keep our morale up, we have to distinguish something. And it's this. We need to distinguish knowing love from loving knowledge. This is what John says. And Aaron read the passage for us today. Let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. And then verse 19. By this we shall know that we are of the truth, and reassure our heart before him. For whenever our heart condemns us, God is greater than our heart, and he knows everything. John emphasizes knowledge quite a bit, but really what he's doing is he's contrasting the experience of a genuine follower of Jesus Christ from kind of the Gnostics who celebrated knowledge, and the sophists and the philosophy who intellectualized everything and made life all about the right apologetic or intellectual arguments. And apologetics and intellectual arguments have their place, but they're actually woefully insufficient to sustain a vibrant Christian walk. What sustains us is not this ability to kind of love knowledge and just keep building a better and better kind of rhetorical argument for our faith and why we're right. That's insufficient. And that really isn't the primary focus of God in his word. We are supposed to be ready to give a reason for the hope that lies within us, but what allows us to do this is the hope that lies within us. And that's actually subjective. That's a personal experience. And we have some good reasons for not wanting to run too far with personal experience. We can be easily deceived. We want to tend to kind of focus on the objective elements of the Christian faith, uh, but you can have all the objective knowledge of God, but not subjectively experience Him in relationship and in love. And your knowledge of God can be completely right, and you can be a lost soul. Whereas your personal experience of God could be authentic and real, that's subjective to you, but your objective knowledge of God might be somewhat distorted. And yet you are a child of the light. And God can train us correctly when it comes to the knowledge of the faith. We must experience Him, and He must experience us. That's at the heart of what God says to Abraham. He says, now I know, I experience that you reverence me, that you fear me. This is at the heart of that chilling statement where Jesus says, depart from me, I never knew you. God has no lack of knowledge. He knows the number of hairs on your head. Not one sparrow falls to the ground apart from His knowledge. But does He know you, and do you know Him? We really need to come back to that focus on a personal experience of the love of God. Because that's what wins over our hearts. That's what becomes the foundation of our walk. And those are experiences that we have and we can recall even when we're going through hard times, like now, like a pandemic, like a lockdown, like another canceled Sunday in the dark of winter. And what people said going into it was going to be a very, very difficult winter, and it has been. But if you have an authentic experience of Jesus Christ, you have an anchor for your soul, which the book of Hebrews points out so beautifully with that imagery of the anchor going into the Holy of Holies and securing that hope for our souls. When we have that kind of experience, then as Paul says so simply but profoundly in Ephesians 3, we know a love, we experience a love that surpasses knowledge. And that's what we all need. We need that encounter and that experience. And that experience is what reassures our hearts. What gives us an ability to tap into that experience? Well, in context here, it's when we love not just in word or talk, but when we love in deed or in actions and in truth. And again, that's experiential. You actually love the people God puts in front of you. You love the church, which we're going to come back to at the end of this today. And you love them sincerely in truth, and it shows up by your actions and how you prioritize what you do to seek to connect with the people of God and build relationship with them. That is the key action. Love for our brothers and sisters. If you go back to verses 16 through 17, that's what John focuses on when he then says in verse 18 to love in word, not just in word, but in deed and in truth. We need that because one of the biggest problems we all face is that our own hearts condemn us. They tear us up. We are filled with anxieties and torments and memories of all the terrible things we've done and imposter syndrome and feeling like we're not really the real deal. And all of us struggle with that. I struggle with those things. I think everybody does. And that's one of our biggest problems, is that our own hearts shred us in the night hours. We sink into this kind of self-destructive, heart dialogue and loop that we just kind of go through. And Jesus understands. He went through it. That's his Gethsemane moment, and we all have our Gethsemane moments. Now, Jesus's Gethsemane moment is different because there was no condemnation that he actually deserved. But again, we're focusing too much on the objective. Well, he didn't actually sin, so he didn't actually have condemnation, but subjectively, he was made sin. He experienced everything that we experience because our own hearts condemn us. And there's reasons why our hearts condemn us, but God is greater than our hearts, and he loves us. He loves you unconditionally with no wavering, and he fully knows the horrible thing you're going to do 10 years from now that you don't think you're capable of sinking to. And if you knew it, you might despair, and your own heart would condemn you. But he's greater than your heart, and he already knows everything. And this is the kind of love of God we must tap into. This is why our Gethsemane moments, where we feel so much condemnation or doubt or anxiety or absence of God, this is why they're so much more important than our walking on the water moments. We all celebrate the walking on the water moments, but it's pretty easy to believe when you're walking on the waters. It's when you get distracted by the storms, when you enter into your Gethsemane, when you sink, will you still call out to Jesus? If you do, you find that his hand is right there. Maybe not as soon as we would have liked, but it's there. God is present and he already knows everything. It's a love that surpasses our knowledge, but we can experience it. And that's important because you might be an older widow whose world is shrinking in and struggling and feeling very alone and not sure what you're going to do. You might, many in our congregation have lost loved ones. You might be a dear senior saint, a Black man who's persevered in the faith in a way that's beyond what a lot of white people can maybe even really fully identify with, through prejudice and hardship and provided for your family. And now you're older and maybe you're feeling alone and you are a widower. You could be Nancy Forney and Dave Matthews Sr. Today is Valentine's Day. And this Valentine's Day has a whole new meaning to two people in our own church family, Nancy Forney and Dave Matthews Sr. Some of you might have noticed that they've been sitting together when they can get to church. But you might not have noticed because a lot of us aren't physically in church. We're not seeing each other. We're shut down. But God has done an amazing thing in their lives. And today, in front of all of you and in the presence of God, on this Valentine's Day, 2021, Dave Matthews Sr. and Nancy Joan Forney formally announce their engagement. Since neither of them believe in long engagements, they're going to be married here at Grace Bible Church in the very near future, as soon as we can figure out the COVID, the wedding arrangements, what can be done, what can't be done. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I've attached their announcement to the email I'm sending out, so you can see that and read it for yourself. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's a hug from heaven. We can go through things, as many seniors go through, and many people in general, of loss, where we feel like our world is shrinking in. It's certainly happening through this pandemic. But heaven is still there. And heaven's not going anywhere. And we need to celebrate those times where we get what I call hugs from heaven. And they break through and love is felt again. And those feelings do come and go, but they're important to celebrate and to note and to kind of build that altar. So, and remember these experiences so that we don't get caught up in our intellect and our analysis. And so much of that is just driven by our sense of insecurity or threat or vulnerability. We've got to get past that and distinguish loving knowledge from knowing love. And I'm so happy for Dave and Nancy, and that they get that hug from heaven that they found in each other quite suddenly, and not really even looking. But it's a beautiful thing. And once we walk in that kind of deep love, then we're in a position to ask the right questions. I talk about asking a lot because the ask and how we ask and why we are asking is so important. But John says in verses 21 through 24 that, "Beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence before God. And whatever we ask, we receive from him, because he keeps his commandments and does what pleases him. We keep his commandments and do what pleases him. And what is his commandment? See, that can sound legalistic, but John's tapping into that idea of commandment because his hearers, his readers, are a large number of them are Jewish Christians, and they value the commandments of God. But what we see in the new covenant is that the commandment is to believe in the name of his son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another. Love God by believing in his son, and love one another, just as he has commanded us. And when we are doing that, whatever we ask, we receive from him. Well, what does that mean? It's not magic. But here, we need to again get to why are we asking and how are we asking? Because there's three kinds of askings in the New Testament, and I've talked about them before. But there's an asking that's kind of, hey, I don't have any claim here. You've been good to me. I am blessed. If you'd be willing to consider this, I would appreciate it. But I have no claim. I'm not claiming an injury or that you owe me anything. I don't feel entitled. That's one ask. Another ask is, wait, I don't understand. I need more information. And that can be good or that can be bad, depending on why do you need more information. Do you have some insecurity or doubt in you? And if so, okay, maybe you need more information. But I think more often than not, especially when it comes to our walk with God, we don't need more information. We need to deal with our insecurity and doubt. And information doesn't really resolve doubt if we're not willing to challenge that doubt and that fear head on and call it what it is, a lack of faith. So that's a second kind of asking that'd be good. But the third kind of asking is when we're demanding and we're interrogating. And that means we're getting upset. Job was starting to drift into that territory at times as he really started interrogating God. And he regretted that later on. I'm not blaming Job. I would have gotten there long before Job did. But Job himself recognized when he was in a better place that he said things that he regretted. Some of his askings were not coming from a good place. But what if our questions are coming from a good place? We're content. We are experiencing the love of God. We are believing in his son. We are committed to this thing called church. We value it. We love our brothers and sisters. That's our fellow Christians. We fellowship with them. That's important to us. We're doing all these things, so we are obeying God's commands. And we're in that good place. Maybe our questions would be different. Maybe why we ask them would be different. Imagine, if you can, if the asking itself arose from a complete resonance and harmony with God's Spirit. Wouldn't then even the question have been Spirit-led? That's what Jesus talks about with his disciples in John chapter 16, verses 19 through 24, where they are asking all these questions and they're getting concerned and troubled. And Jesus says, when the Holy Spirit comes and you experience the Holy Spirit, on that day, you won't ask me anything in that interrogating kind of way, that doubting. Wait, I have to have more information. Wait, what are you saying? Hey, I'm scared. Wait, what's that? I don't feel safe. And Jesus says, that'll all go away when you're walking in step with the counselor. And then whatever you ask is actually coming from the counselor. It's creating a loop, a positive feedback loop, where the Holy Spirit is leading you into a beautiful inquiry. And in that inquiry, you are experiencing the love of God and your faith, which may go through dark nights of the soul, like a pandemic. But even there, it's being shown that it's worth more than gold, which perishes though refined by fire. Aren't even our questions different when we feel no need, when we ask from a place of joy, when we do not fear loss, when we are asking with an undivided heart that has transcended our own doubts and condemnation because God is greater than our hearts and he knows everything? Try to imagine times in your life where you were in that place, brief though they may be. Didn't you even ask your questions from a totally different frame of soul, not just frame of mind, frame of soul. The emphasis here in the asking and the answering is not about performance. That's why you got to be careful about how you understand that commandment idea. It's about union. It's about resonance. It's about harmony. It's about not needing to have figured everything out, not needing knowledge as a crutch, because I am walking in resonance with God, so that whatever I ask, even the asking itself, I have received from Him. It just creates a communication and a dialogue, which creates a fellowship, which creates a union. And those are beautiful questions. Those are the kinds of questions that I'm sure that Nancy and Dave enjoy asking each other right now as they blossom in this first love. The emphasis is union. When we are in resonance with the Spirit and harmony, even our askings come from Him. So of course we receive. What if even your ask came from Him? It is this understanding that causes these verses to flow into spiritual warfare and testing the spirits. I'd encourage you to listen to my Pastoral Connect from last Thursday if you haven't done that yet, because I talk about authenticating the spirits there. And I'm going to be making that the focus of my sermon next week, is how we authenticate and test the spirits. But in the meantime, try to distinguish when you are knowing God's love versus loving knowledge. Our apologetic is going to ring hollow and may even cover a lot of deep flaws in us if we're not really experiencing and knowing the love of God. The sad testimony of Ravi Zacharias might fit that bill. Peace on his soul. I bear him no ill will or even anger. It's just sad. Because when we are experiencing and knowing the love of God, we can distinguish that from our apologetic. And the experience is more real. And when you have that experience of the love of God, then even your askings are right and come from Him. And that settled place of peace in a pandemic shows us that heaven is real. It's not going anywhere. We're going to get there if we know Jesus, and we can celebrate the hugs that break through into this dark world, like Nancy and Dave's story, and persevere through these dark nights of the soul. I pray that you will. I pray that I will. I'm so grateful for the people of Grace and how you have rallied through this pandemic. And I believe we will rally and come through these 3 weeks of not meeting, and just how discouraging that can be for many of us. Remember, you know the love of God, and God knows you. And He's greater than our hearts, even when our own hearts condemn us. That is an encouraging thought.